We have the reoccurring theme that you'll see in other classes, so it kind of goes across business disciplines for that matter too, and that is adverse selection, moral hazard. So we worked through a couple examples of that last time, and the principal agent problem. All of these are examples of imperfect information or asymmetric information between parties in a transaction or some sort of exchange. So, does anybody want to take a stab at these two, the difference between adverse selection and moral hazard? Cadence?
Moral hazard is like when they have like insurance to cover something, and so they do it more because they feel safe.
Right. So it's a little bit more on the behavior side, right? On how you act. So moral hazard is more on behavior change. Post-contract, if you want to think of it that way. Now that's a little bit abstract, but you go to the buffet line, you made a contract, so to speak, with the restaurateur, gave them $10 for all-you-can-eat buffet, right? So afterwards, your eating behavior is a little different than had you paid by the plate or paid by the item. So behavior change post-contract. So how about adverse selection then? Yes, so pre-contract, people have information that they may not reveal willfully to the other person. So if you're trying to get the insurance contract, you might not tell them that you like jumping out of airplanes and driving fast, and you used to drag race when you were 16, and you ride bulls, and you know all these risky types of activity. You might not divulge that, but you might be a higher risk person than what they've put you out to be, right? So pre-contract for adverse selection, we have kind of pre-contract issues on, we might be selecting people adversely to that policy, not knowing it. So pre-contract, we don't really know what people are, or they don't reveal to us really when we're giving them health insurance that they've been a chain smoker for the last 20 years. What's that?
We have a way to identify high quality versus low quality.
Right. And that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
We have high quality people, low quality people, and yes, can we, if we knew the high quality, yes, it's kind of like the high quality laptop, low quality laptop. If we could separate people, then high quality people would pay lower premiums than low quality people, right? And the market would kind of work itself out better. Instead, we have them potentially mixed, not allowing just the true uncertain things to happen, but the way people behave might drive the result. So with adverse selection, insurance companies especially are in the business of screening. They're in the business of screening behavior. So the simple application, they try to ask you those questions. You could lie on those things. You're not under oath or whatever. I mean, you have your honor, but of course they know that some people will not tell all the stories of their past and how risky of a person they actually are, right? So they try to engage in screening, is the technical term, and offering group policies. They can mitigate the risk by spreading that risk. So this is an important somewhat of a drawback to the way our insurance system is now with small businesses. Because if you offer health insurance to one person, you got to offer it to everybody. But if you're a small employer with just 10 employees and you get a couple people that are old or become fairly ill, your premiums will go up for your small group of 10 people. So, but that's a way that the insurance company tries to hedge their risk with that issue, so that the group premiums rise and fall according to the number of claims that are going on. Okay, and then principal agent problem is somewhat similar, except now there's a more direct relationship. When we talk insurance, we're talking customer relationship, right? So here you've got possibly the insurance company and the insurance agent, for instance. So the agent is the insurance agent is truly an agent for the company. If we go into the real estate industry, we got the company or the owner of the business and the agent who's representing them. But this goes down to employer, employee, all kinds of relationships like that. How do I get the best out of my employees? Their self-interest might not align with my business interest, and it might be more beneficial for them to slack off or shirk, is the word economists use for that. And so you come up with novel ways maybe to try to align those interests as best you can. But the principal agent problem is certainly one that will never truly go away. Okay. The last thing I wanted to mention here was signaling. This is kind of a separate. So signaling is in some ways similar to screening. So it's kind of a pre-contract type of thing. And you can send out a signal to prospective people that you are a high quality person. I used to do this in the real estate business a little bit. I would put on my business cards, prior to me getting my PhD, I was all but dissertation, so PhD, ABD, you know, an okay thing. I wasn't being wrong in it. But I really purposely put it on the business card because I found I got looked upon as somehow more qualified, even though to be a real estate agent, you do not need to be the sharpest knife in the drawer. I mean, a lot of people are very successful at it with a high school education, right? But I would put that PhD, ABD on there to signal to people that, well, he must be kind of smart, or we can trust him, he's an educated guy, or whatever, right? So I'm just sending out a signal. It may or may not be credible. The best signals are credible signals. And so your degree from Ottawa University, getting your bachelor's degree, is a signal. They don't, when you go to apply for a job, maybe you'll be applying for something that they're looking at people with and without degrees. Well, you're sending a signal to them saying, I dedicated a good chunk of my life to getting my degree. I've got it. I've got evidence of it. You're kind of sending a signal that you might be a more productive worker potentially than another person off the street that says, well, I'm a good worker too. Trust me, right? So that's a signal, and it shows that you have maybe more potential, and it might be a credible one at that, since you committed a significant amount of time and money to get that degree. So that's the idea of signaling. Another signal that I sent when I applied for this position, when I was getting interviewed, can employers ask you about your family? Can they ask you about your religion? No. So I would kind of signal to them, oh, well, at my church or at a Bible study or something, you can kind of send a signal like, hey, I know it's not on my resume, or you can't ask me that question, but I can tell you whatever I want, right? So I can signal to them different things. Okay. Questions or comments there? All right, so that's our closing thoughts for that chapter. Take a look at chapter 17. Prior to class, I emailed you guys all 3 chapters PowerPoints, just as an additional study tool. In fact, I think they're accessible to you off at glsmicro.com, but I thought I'd just send them off to you just in case. So they're sitting in your email account as well. And this will allow us to kind of look at some of the issues here. So this whole chapter is really concepts and definitions and applications to how that might work in the real world. So one of the things that prompted me to do my dissertation on charitable giving was kind of precisely this, that the standard economic model is of rational choice. And on the front end of it, it appears that maybe people who are giving their time or giving to charity, are they selfish, self-interested? At the time I wrote the dissertation, I don't think I was as clear as I think I am now on what it means to be self-interested. But it doesn't seem to fit. And so that's where this behavioral economics took off from, was trying to explain what the real world is like. The main thing here is looking for systematic departures from rational choice. What does it mean to be systematic about departing from rational choice? So the idea here would be, have you guys ever made a decision that was somewhat irrational? Yeah, I think we all have. So what would it mean to be, so we know that it goes on, and the economists would argue, well, on average, we're rational. And so our economic models do a pretty good job of predicting behavior, because one person's irrational behavior on this side of the fence is canceled by another person's irrational behavior on this side of the fence. And so on average, we're pretty rational, and our economic models tend to make sense. Now, what would be a systematic departure from rational choice? Sam?
Maybe when there are incentives.
Yes. Okay, so we want to analyze why. What's the outcome that makes us look at if there's incentives causing that departure? And how are they departing, though? So what I kind of described to you guys. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of the heart of what I want to get at. So what I just described to you was, here's the rational choice Q. That's the rational. On average, we get that. Some people are irrational this way, some people are irrational, but on average, people make the rational choice. But if there's a systematic departure from rationality, what's going to be true about the outcomes we're seeing? Are they going to tend to be higher or lower on average, or they're going to tend to be one tail or the other? So if we're systematically seeing an outcome that is lower than what we'd expect, we do an experiment, we collect some data, and the outcome is Q2. We do it again and again, the outcome's Q2. We keep seeing Q2, Q2, maybe there's a Q3, maybe there's a Q4, but each time we test this hypothesis, we always seem to be below what the rational choice would predict. We're not seeing observations over here that does that balancing act, right? So that's a systematic departure. We're being biased. So if we start to see stuff like that, then we know that, well, wait a second, maybe something else is going on. And so that's part of what allows us then to dig a little deeper. If we start seeing behavior that is consistently over here, we need to dig a little deeper and say, why? Why is that happening? Okay, so the chapter goes through different biases that have been uncovered by behavioral economists over the last 20 years. And so some of these should ring true with you as you start to think, oh yeah, people do kind of behave that way. So systematic bias number 1, overconfidence. People think they look better than they really do. College students are saying that they're better on average on a self-reporting basis. Well, it can't be that everybody thinks they're better than average, otherwise we really don't have an average, right? So we're systematically, if the real average is here, nobody's claiming to be average. They're all thinking they're over here, right? So, what's that? That's true, probably. That might be a product of that everybody's a winner. Everybody wins, yes. You guys have all of these too, so if you want to jot down notes, you're welcome to, but you'll have all of these. So then, how do markets take advantage of that? Well, gym memberships pay per month rather than per use. I don't know about you, but when I'm in the face of that, I often turn it down, right? It's like, I need that marginal cost to be zero. I've kind of bit the bullet. It's $30. Should I go to the gym? Yeah, but if that gym costs me $2 a time or $3 a time, might change my behavior. Even though at the end of the day, and I've done this on some kind of pay-per-use, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but let's just say you analyzed yourself and you're like, I only go to the gym about 10 times a month. And so if it's only $2 a time, 10 times 2 is 20, right? So I'd be spending $20 instead of the $30 per month membership fee. You've been faced with those types of, possibilities. Well, that's not by happenstance that you might pick that monthly fee, because once you have done that, you don't go as often. It's like, oh, there's that extra $2, and so then you just end up not going and getting fat. Okay, so self-control and hyperbolic discounting. This is an interesting one. I think you guys all got the self-control issue. But what economists have found is that people really put a lot of weight, almost an irrational amount of weight, on something now and present. And this is such a cultural thing now, and it'd be interesting to have tested people 50, 60 years ago to see if they're really the same way. I'm not sure what's culturally caused us to kind of grow into the beast that I think we are now, but it's always now, got to have it now, right? And to the point where, if I offer you, I'll give you $100 a year from now, or what would you take today? If I just reached into my wallet, I promise I'm good for it, I'll give you $100 a year from now, or I'll give you some amount right now. What would it take to buy you off of that deal? $10? $20? Yeah, well, we didn't do that, but that's what people tend to think. How many of you would maybe be tempted to take $20 right now instead of $100 a year from now? $50, right? You'd be awfully tempted, right? When I start to get in that 20, 30, 40 zone, everybody might be a little different. But think about how irrational that is, how great of a rate of return it is. If you take that $20 and were to invest it and got 10%, in one stinking year, you'd have $22 next year. So what I'm essentially offering you, by you being willing to take $20 today in lieu of $100 a year from now, that's 20 doubled to 40, doubled to 80, 200+% rate of return. But you'll still take that 20 today. It's just too tempting. Right? It's in your hands, it's tangible, it's touchable. And so that is something that businesses have been able to take advantage of as well in terms of sales techniques and other things. So there's a time consistency depending on how, and we'll get into framing here in a little bit, but credit card companies are marvels at this. Get $10 off today, and then you sign in, and then you get sucked in, right? So they're kind of masters of taking advantage of that particular bias. All right, so this is just a quick comment on this one. An economist designed something thinking about these biases and how they might get people to stick to what they're doing. And so, have you heard about this? That they'll give money to a charity if you don't do it? So, the idea is you say, I don't want to lose 10 pounds. And so you put $50 or $100 into their account. And they have referees that kind of keep tabs on you on what your progress is. And if you're not doing what your plan was, whatever you said it was, you set the stage. You can make the bar as high or as low, but by putting a little bit of monetary cost to it, they found that people stick to it better. And so then if they lose, then the money goes off to a charity. If they win, they get it back. So it's like people just kind of putting their money where their mouth is. And so by putting a price tag on it, they tend to perform a little better.
And also, on one of the reports, it said it was like a charity they don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if they like it.
That's right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So if you're a staunch Republican, you might be giving to the Democratic Party, to Obama's, presidential campaign. Yes. Right. So you put the incentives in the other direction. Yes. Okay. Framing. Framing is something that I used, I guess, quite a bit in the real estate business, with kind of posing prices, and there's some anchoring. A lot of these things are mixed in, but how you word something can have a big impact. So economists, being the data collectors that they are, early on would collect data, and then they started noticing, well, if the question was worded slightly different, they could get some seriously different results. And those come from a number of things combined together. I think I mentioned the coffee cup experiment one time in class. So if you're given something and put a value on it versus whether you're just pricing it, if you own it, you tend to put a higher value on it than somebody who doesn't own it. So the experiment was something along these lines. I might not be getting this perfect, but we come into class, and one group of a large number of people would say, "What do you think this coffee cup's worth?" And they put on, "Oh, I don't know, $3 or whatever." They just eyeball it and put a $3. Then on a different experiment, the class comes in, and the coffee cup's on their desk, and they're saying, "Class, I got some good news. Ottawa University's giving you these mugs." "Oh, wow, that's nice of them." And what do you think those mugs are worth? "Oh, $5? All of a sudden it's worth more now that they own it. So that's this idea of an endowment effect. Okay, another interesting one that does kind of relate back to some utility. People are hurt more by losses than by gains. So if you pose a win of $10 versus a loss of $10, if you're losing $10 of your own money, that hurts more than winning $10 and getting it. Then the benefit. That's great. That the utility derived from the the utility lost from the loss is bigger than the utility gained by the win. A little bit to do with the shape of the utility function on that as well.
So the losses hurt more than the gain.
Losses hurt more. Yeah, a $10 loss hurts you more than a $10 gain benefits you. So with anchoring bias, how I use this in real estate a little bit was if we went into a house and they were asking $160,000 for a house, and I would, if I knew information about what they pay, I mean, I like to provide my clients with as much information as possible, but a lot of people, or some people, want to just always lowball. They have to be getting the deal. They're always going to undercut. And so by telling people the data that, well, 90% of the houses sell within 5% of their asking price, and kind of start framing things there. And also if this homeowner paid $165,000 and they're asking $160,000, so they're taking a loss, then people would kind of anchor, oh, $165,000 is what they paid. Well, let's just offer something close to that or whatever. So it would kind of change people's thinking depending on how a question was framed. Mental accounting is kind of similar to what we just discussed with people compartmentalizing things. And so again, a windfall of $100, that extra $10 might be spent differently than money that you earned. Move on to the next one here. Salespeople, realtors, home sellers, this is so true. People will get hung up on price and ignore other terms, even though there's some substitutability to it. So car dealers will do this with monthly payments and trade-ins. So if you go to trade in your car, oh, well, we'll give you $4,000, but then that's less that they'll negotiate off the price. Because people, you know, some people come in that they don't like to negotiate prices, so the price is fine, and the dealer can kind of get them in by giving them a higher price than maybe what they would otherwise do for the trade-in. Other folks come in and they want that price to be down, so then we do the trade-in value less, right? And so, or the interest rate that you might be paying on your loan. And that's what I found over the years in buying real estate. Sellers would typically need to get their price for whatever reason. So we got to get $200,000 for this property, and so I would come into that maybe offering a low price, recognizing that they're kind of hung up on 200, but then getting favorable financing terms. So instead of having to get an interest rate of 7%, which might have been the market rate at the time, I get a 4% interest rate. And so if you take the entire package, I might be well better off leaving the price where it is, making them happy, but getting super favorable terms in a different way. So that's the idea of mental accounting. People tend to get hung up on certain compartments. Okay, we talked about generosity and selflessness and altruism earlier. Sunk cost. That's probably the most difficult one over the years, I think, for economists to try to get through people's heads. They just don't want to ignore the money that's already out the door. So at the margin, any cost that can't be recovered is sunk. Forget about it. Doing your marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis, you just go about it that way. But if you spent $100 for that ticket to the basketball game, oh, I just have to go because I'll be wasting my money. No, the money's already wasted. Whatever the costs are that night of the gas to get to the ball game and whatever things you might be giving up, those are your true costs. All right, so the last little bit here gets into talking about how we investigate behavior. And what's interesting is this is a real combination of psychology and economics. And our normal way we have collected data prior to experimental economics, by the way, Vernon Smith is the guy who is known as the guru. He's a Nobel laureate for his work in kind of developing this relatively new field, probably one of the newest fields in economics. So econometrics was the standard thing that everybody did. The real world results in outcomes, and we assume that those outcomes came from a bunch of agents making rational choices. We go in and apply statistics to see what the elasticity of demand is. How sensitive are people to income? How sensitive are people to price? So that's collecting real world data and then applying statistics and mathematics to that to come up with some results. What's different here is we create an artificial environment. So it might be this classroom and we pose some sort of question. Maybe it's the prisoner's dilemma or some other, trying to see if people want to penalize or if altruism's true. We watched the video from the Freakonomics. So setting up kind of this artificial environment with real money on the line. and running an experiment and see what people do. I saw an interesting thing fairly recently. Most of these experiments have been done with college kids. I can't remember if it's this slide or something else, but a large fraction. At one of the conferences I was at, I think in San Diego and over the break, it was something like 80–90% of the experiments had like college kids. So the thought was, we're all human beings. Human beings behave the same. College kids have a low opportunity cost. We can pay them off with $10 and see how their little brain works. How their brain works is how the rest of the world works, right? That was kind of the extrapolation that was done. And when they go out, a different researcher started doing some experiments in Africa and other places and found a lot different results in some cases where, you know, it makes a difference if you're looking where your next meal is potentially. And it's almost like, duh, I didn't, you know, think about that. I'm sure a lot of people thought that too, that you run these experiments, human beings are all the same, you know, whatever. But what they're playing on, and potentially a lot of those human beings are the same, but they're under different circumstances, right? And that changes the results that you get. So they're getting new and more material as the field grows over time. So this is the lab experiment. That's what we just went over. And then there's a couple other variations of this. A natural experiment happens when you take advantage of something that happened or policy that's in place. Sometimes this is like a border study too. So if you have two counties that are right next to each other and one has high tax rates and the other one doesn't, we can kind of study behavior on each side of the border. Possibly a natural disaster comes up and we can study something that happened. So those are natural experiments, seeing how people behave under circumstances when the world creates its own little laboratory on itself. We didn't design it that way, but it just kind of happened through a policy change or something else. And then field experiments is probably closer to reality TV. This is a little tougher, but you let random events happen. So in a lab experiment, it's very formalized. We know what we're throwing at people and how we expect them to behave, and then we get what they do kind of in this classroom. In a field experiment, we might be letting them out and let random things happen to them. So it's just, again, a kind of a variation of that. All right, questions or comments there?
So, experimental economics consists of lab experiments, natural experiments, and field experiments.
Yep. Yep. And this, you know, the subjects are picked here. And so that's where the difference is from the kind of the traditional model where we're just collecting data. Here we've chosen some subjects to analyze. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it for 17. All right.
So chapters 15 and 17
For the 14, 15, 17.
Yeah, I know that 14
Oh.
is just half of it, right?
Right. I didn't do the first front end of that chapter.
15 and 17 are complete chapters?
Yes. However, I did restrict the number of problems in 15, but yes, the whole chapter as far as, and again, a lot of this is definitions and I think a little bit softer material than what we had in some of the other ones. But as far as the general equilibrium chapter, that's where I wanted to at least call your attention. It's fair game for marginal rates of substitution, marginal rate. I mean, all that goes back to the previous chapters. So that's where you can spend some time thinking about what we did. You might even review back to those previous chapters as you think about all of these things. Marginal rate of transformation, marginal rate of technical substitution. Am I forgetting any? I think those are the main ones. So, all the equilibrium conditions.
So, as far as like a general idea how this finals can work, since in the tests that we've had much of, equation-based or anything like that, obviously 14 might be a little more like that, but
Yeah.
as far as 15 and 17, are they going to be more multiple choice? Or
Yeah, there's going to be more multiple choice type problems, possibly true false. I haven't written it yet, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but yeah, there'll be more. So yeah, a lot more definitional stuff. I mentioned before about the glsmicro.com. There's the flashcard function. So certainly 15 and 17, you can kind of test yourself that way on definitions. There's also a little quiz function in those two that I think would be similar as well. Okay. Any other questions?
When do you want our homework?
Why don't you guys bring them tomorrow? What I want to do is basically turn them around to you. So it'll be kind of a show and go. I want to look, see that you did them. I'll mark you down. You can take it along with you. So I'll be around most of the day tomorrow. So why don't we, and you guys are free too. Why don't we say, check my, I was going to say like 1 o'clock. You got jury duty?
No.
Oh, what'd you say?
Juries, it's like our instrumental final.
Okay. Thought I heard jury duty. Okay.
Just because you play in front of a panel of judges,
Okay.
it's just your jury. It's like your final.
Well, how about we say you guys can drop by my office anytime between 1 and 2 tomorrow? Okay? I'll be in my office 1 to 2. I'll just kind of make that an office hour. And then we can show and go. And then if you guys have other questions, of course, we can talk them too. Oops.
If you're like, or if we might not be here in that hour, could we either drop by later today or like leave it in your
Yeah.
box?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Let's just
Or do you check or show it? Can you check it? Here it is. I got you.
Yeah, I'll be flexible. I'll be around most of the day anyway, but I thought this way I'll definitely have a time down. All right, let's do evaluations. I need a volunteer to just bring these down to second floor. Anyone? Anyone?
You see,